Okay, here we are again with my friend Brent Kelly. And Brent, we have spoken before about various topics um, for which viewers can listen to your comments. I'm going to be perhaps a bit redundant because we've had technical problems. So for those that either haven't heard your responses or are interested in seeing your face, I might drill down on some of these subjects. So Brett, you want to first say hi to everybody?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, fourth time's the charm. I know we got one good quality video out. But Brett, Kelly, I know we've gotten the chance to continue to meet, and this is kind of a part two of just connecting and talking life and yeah, getting to kind of share my thoughts to be able to eventually go back and revisit and yeah, looking forward to talking.
One of the subjects we spoke about is cycling and your interest
Yep.
in cycling and kind of what we've spoken about the connection between suffering on the bike and suffering in life.
hmm
So maybe we can drill down a little bit into your perspective and your inner dialogue, your self-talk when you're suffering on the bike, and then how that relates to suffering in life in general, whether it's talking about relationships, talking about career
hmm
sufferings, uh, whether it's talking about any sort of suffering in the world. So uh, maybe we could start by your restating your
Yeah.
bike race up at Big Bear and what you experienced in terms of suffering.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've kind of talked on the theme of I've suffering and learning to kind of push through things on in cycling, which I've been doing for the past couple of years, has really informed and given me confidence in like the rest of my life, where kind of maybe before cycling, the confidence to push through things, knowing that you could, make it through, wasn't as much there. So I've definitely found kind of stepping back, cycling as a whole has really given me like confidence in a unique way. And it's, I think, kind of speaking of suffering, I know we've talked about it, but it's a privilege to kind of suffer on the bike because it's self-imposed and getting, you know, it's a kind of a safe environment, as painful as it is to go learn how to do that and then kind of bring it back to more important things in life. Um, and so yeah, it's really taught me a lot. And then in terms of, I know last time we talked when we had some technical difficulties. I just finished that race up in Big Bear, and really that was probably the worst day I've ever had on a bike, pain wise. Getting through the end of the race, it was a 100-mile race up in Big Bear, and we had about 15 of us on a team trying to race it, so we were pushing pretty hard, and then I completely just blew up at the end where it was the big climb from mile 80 to mile 88, and yeah, I think kind of going back to the inner dialogue in the past, it would have been kind of, I'm not going to finish, I'm not going to be able to make it. And that just, those wheels start turning in your head and then you give up. And I think what cycling's given me, and I really was able to experience on the bike last weekend because it was one of the worst days where historically I probably would have quit. Um, Although I like limped my way home to the finish line, was still able to finish. And I think that's kind of the inner dialogue change of going from, you know, when you hit a wall, can you push through it? Or when I think growing up enough times where you hit a wall and you kind of just give up, you kind of reinforce that in your own mind and your own self-talk. And then I think self-talk is almost like habitual in like how you develop or redevelop habits, like anything else in life. And I think having opportunities to like find successes in one category of your life, whether it's think that's why, I mean, I think the physical challenges are so valuable because it can inform and grow confidence in other areas of your life because you realize when I, keep showing up and be consistent and work hard, um, you almost kind of you master the process in one area and that process seems to often be very similar in other areas. And I'm still learning it, but I've definitely seen the impact of it already in my life and bringing it to career. And you have a bad day, just like you do on a bike, just show up the next day and do the best you can. And over time, you can continue to grow and that dialogue can change. And it's definitely not overnight. So, yeah.
Well, one of the words you used in terms of describing this specific example of suffering is self-imposed, where
Hmm.
you consciously chose to get on the bike and ride the 100 miles up in Big Bear. There's also,
Stupid idea.
yes, there's also suffering that is not part of your, excuse me, part of your decision.
Hmm.
It's where things happen. Life is not always fair, and there are examples of people that are find themselves suffering through any number of things, whether it's economic suffering, whether it's uh, racial disparities, whether it's biases and prejudices that other
Hmm.
people have that result in uh, the person suffering being um, dealt a hand that is not self-imposed. It's they have the choice.
Mm.
How have you experienced suffering that was not, to use your word, self-imposed?
Mm. Yeah. I'd say one, I do feel so lucky to, yeah, get to self-impose it. And at least right now in my life, feel so blessed. And I know you've been an inspiration to really to me to how can you, when you're blessed, how can you bring others up with you and, love on them and connect with them when they are going through suffering that's not in their control. And so I feel so lucky right now to be able to be encouraged by you to do that. I'd say, you know, growing up or kind of stuff experienced, in my life, I'd say, I have an awesome girlfriend now, but I'd say I'm 28 and I think relationally, um, dated different people where, it either doesn't work out or, I'd say, yeah, personally for me going through just whether it's tough relationships or doubt or personal doubt that you're going to find someone. I think I've seen, at my age, there's other friends that are kind of in the same bucket, and that's a really important part of their life. And um, I think getting to kind of work through that and kind of it's just the doubts and you try and it doesn't succeed. And um, I'd say that's one kind of more recently for me, feel so blessed now, but I've kind of watched other people in their life and then kind of related it to there's a period in my life kind of in my early 20s up until now, not saying I'm that old but still at 28, uh friends get married and friends find someone, and so I think that was an area where it's just, it's whether it's self-doubt or things just don't work out and kind of struggles there. I'd say that's one, kind of with where I've been at in my life and kind of what, I'd love for the future. That was one for a while that was definitely like, asking the Lord why or, um, yeah. And I think really where I'm proud of myself is kind of going back to like, this is who I am. I'm, proud of who God made me, and you just got to keep showing up, um, as much as you can on your end, and then the rest of it you can't really control. And I think that's the can't control element that you speak to too, of especially in relationships because it's a partnership. You only can do what you can do, and not saying I always did the best, but kind of going back and revisiting and trying to learn. And yes, I'd say immediate one was in the more recent future was that, but um it's also cool to see now I have like an amazing girlfriend and she's actually coming out. I'm in Washington, back home with family right now, and she's coming out to visit and spend some time, which is really fun. So um, I still feel lucky to say relationship struggles is um, an example of trials and tribulations, and it's impactful to me, but also acknowledge that there's so many people that um, circumstances are they do not have the same opportunities in life, and it's like how can I, having had been blessed with opportunities, candidly, how can I be a part of their story too and not just focus on my own story?
So what you're saying in reading between the lines is
Hmm.
sometimes one can learn best by observing other people's way of dealing with suffering.
Mm,
Uh, when you see people suffering life's unfairness,
mm,
regardless of what it is specifically, there are a couple of ways you could react to or respond to observing other people going through suffering. Whether it's, as we've spoken about, Viktor Frankl's, reading about him being uh, involved or incarcerated in Auschwitz,
hmm,
dealing with that kind of unfairness, or Rosa Parks, uh, her suffering in racial prejudice, or
mm,
any person that doesn't choose to uh, be in those circumstances. Your view, what what is your view when you observe people as they transition and deal with suffering? Do you feel sorry for them? Do you feel compassion for them? Do you feel
hmm,
respect for them? What's your vision of how you observe people that have gone through life's unfairness?
mm. Yeah, I think yeah, I think that the emotional reaction is different depending on the situation, like very much whether it's racially um kind of driven. I think there's more like frustration there for the people. It wasn't Rosa Parks who um forced that upon herself. It was the people and the environment around her. And so or like stories of Jackie Robinson, there's like inspiration, but then also like inspiration for what they went through, to kind of run with the torch, where really stark examples of, or in Auschwitz, with Viktor Frankl, really stark examples of there's nothing they could have done. And so in some ways it's frustrating to see where we came from, or even especially today when you see other examples like that. It's I'd say my reaction is more frustrated, but then also inspired to see how people, like, how the individual responds to their suffering. And then if it's something more related to me, where frustrating, like watching someone treat someone wrong or kind of put them in a situation, if there is like, if I'm in close proximity or can like respond, I hope that more and more I choose to respond or make an impact, and kind of identify where I can kind of observe and learn from them and how they handled it kind of from the past. um, and how I can be a part of, either not, yeah, be a part of supporting someone or encouraging someone kind of in life today, right in front of me. So
Well, their
um,
choice
mm,
is their choice of attitude. So
mm,
they can either be victims, they could see themselves as victims, or they can just accept the reality of what the situation is and make the best out of their circumstance.
mhm.
So, from those two choices of attitude, which one would you choose were you in that situation?
I'd like to think, you know, I'm, I, yeah, I really believe that you can, you control how you can respond. No one can take that from you. And I know we've talked about Viktor Frankl talking about when everything is lost, he still has the freedom to choose how he reacts and how he handles it. And that is like when all your freedom's gone, there is still freedom and there's power in that, like choosing to have hope or choosing to decide how you respond. So I think when you personally, when you just play the victim, um, and doesn't mean you aren't the victim, but like when you just act like the victim, you acknowledge that there's nothing you can do, and so like you can't respond positively or there's no control that you have. And I think no matter what your circumstance, you always have some control over how you react to it, whether you have control over the situation. Um, when you're just the victim, you don't have the opportunity to you shirk responsibility to respond and like control your own response and destiny in some ways.
So which, from your perspective, garners more respect? Observing a person going through a circumstance as a victim, or with grace, mercy, and forgiveness? Which
I'd
garners
say
more respect?
the latter for sure. And it's amazing to watch when people do respond in that way.
So if we were to model ourselves then and have some sort of template or mantra for when we go through it, would that be a way of learning from other people's way of dealing with suffering for one's own dealing with life's unfairness?
Mm, absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like acknowledging that the challenge will come in life and they always will. And that's a part of the adventure and the learning. Like, how can I learn from others and kind of, once again, it's a privilege to have to suffer on a bike, but how can, when reality hits, how can I kind of stay steady and still have that same response and perspective? Um, and I think that will just come. So hoping that I can handle that when it does, and like handle it with grace and um, acknowledging that at the end of the day, yeah, this life isn't um, not just meant to be all rainbows and butterflies. Probably never will be.
Well, that kind of leads me to what we've spoken about before about success,
Hmm.
quote unquote, uh, and how will you measure your life? Uh, what would you say at 28 years old is the measurement of success, number one? And then number two, if you take away the material things of life, which should be normal in one's transition from various stages of life when they're young and through college and so forth, to the more existential definitions of success.
Hmm.
Uh, Talk a little bit about your vision of what success will be for you in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I'd say I hold two things kind of at the same time of getting to grow kind of from that college period of success is just, career and you have this life you picture in your head. It's not just career, but like, financial freedom to do all these things. And I just want to create this life that I dreamed for myself versus I think as I've grown, um, and it's still battling this perspective of like, how do I grow in my career and make an impact and be, successful? I think that's like, there's a lot of career and impact influence there, but then also stepping back and realizing the foundation of it all is, I think success to me really is the community and friends and um, how I conduct myself in my life, regardless of like the actual work I'm doing and the money I'm making. And um, I definitely wanting like family and growth there. So I think for me, trying to hold on to that perspective and still be driven and aspire to career goals and life goals, but like not letting that be um would be the word. Not letting that like take the reins over prioritizing family and like loving on others around me and just like really being present like today because I don't want to just keep kicking the can on, you know, impact that I can make today because I can do everything today that I can do in, 20 years from like, a level of importance and what's valuable. I can love on people and I can, encourage them and, live out my faith today just as well as I can do it in 20 years when I'm, if I'm successful financially. So I think for me over the next 5 years, really just continuing to build and foster community and make sure like I can create a career that's shaped around being able to value the right things like that more than I value um, you know chasing a check.
So
I guess.
the what I'm hearing from you is that there are certain things that are more important than just chasing the check. Is that what you mean?
Correct.
So
Yep.
what would those uh, important things be? Those perhaps intangible examples of success for you at 28 years old.
Yeah, I think I might have mentioned on our last podcast, I feel like I've been really lucky and proud to have built this beautiful community down in San Diego where I'm living right now. And I think really just the intangibles, but the things that I think really trying to value is yeah, continuing to build community in the sense where I can actually spend time and pour into them and love on them and make an impact versus just being kind of someone that pops in and out and isn't really present. So I think just continuing to have value there and on family and just like cherishing things that really last like forever and are important versus the things that are gone by the end of life. So I think the adventure is something I definitely value. And so I think the adventure career is something that's like I do put that in the bucket of success and things I want to chase is like whatever it looks like, having an adventure with career and doing something unique or interesting or challenging. I think that's something that I really want, but not letting that overshadow, I think, yeah, community and just loving on the people and being present on the people around me.
Sounds like one of those is when you talk about community is relationships.
Hmm.
What are the values that would make for a successful relationship?
I think for me, like I'm hyper extrovert and always doing things. So I think just quality time with people, being able to go do things with people for me and in community is so valuable. Like friends that we can go on a hike, we can go backpacking, you can go for a surf. And then beyond that, I think it's so valuable to have just transparency with each other, like a community where there's not a facade of like, oh, I'm cool or I'm, having to show yourself any more than who you are. And like, how can I have this like honest, you know, awesome relationship with friends where you can just kind of speak your mind and share what you're going through. And I think when the thinner that veil is of who you're trying to be versus who you really are with your friends, I think that's like probably one of the things I look to and value the most in like community is getting to just like be who you are. And also like I think when you are transparent and like honest, you receive that back. So I think what your relationship is or how your friends share with you is probably a pretty good reflection of how you share with your friends and
Yeah,
community.
there's a book called Love Languages. I think there's like
Hmm.
5 love language. What is your love language? It sounds like uh, shared experiences would be one, and sounds like open and honest transparency, vulnerability. Uh, is there anything else that would be? what Brett Kelly's love language is?
Yeah, I probably tip my hat a little bit, but I'd say it's pretty far and away quality time. Just being able to spend time with people, and it's not like you have to dive into life every time you talk. I think just as valuable as feeling like you can sit in a car with a friend and you don't have to fill no, space. You're just comfortable around each other. So to be honest, that's kind of my number one, and it's not even really close. All the things are other love languages are valuable, but I'd say that's the that one takes the cake for me pretty significantly is just time spent with people.
Well, that's a definition of love that in our secular world can be so misleading. And yet, from a scriptural perspective, love is defined in other ways. Uh,
Mm,
Patience, kindness. Uh, you know the verse.
hmm
Is there something that you would particularly want to focus on going forward for you in terms of defining and living out your love as you've described it?
mm. And it's such a great point. I feel like yeah, love languages are like how can I meet my needs, and it's like also kind of looking out to the like what are other people's and kind of loving on them is probably just as important. Um, and if I understand your question correctly, like with the fruits of the spirit and like or like what embodies love, I think for me, probably the one I can work on is patience and like slowing down. Um, I think with being extrovert, I'm just bouncing around from thing to thing all the time, and whether it's hobbies, which I have a lot of, or it's just community things, which are all great, but I think being able to make sure I can be present and like attentive within that. So I think a little bit of peace, a little bit of patience could go a long way.
Well,
Something I want to grow in.
there's another mantra that says whatever you water grows.
Mm.
So from Brent Kelly's standpoint in 2024, what are you watering? What have you watered? What do you want to water?
Yeah, I think I have watered a lot of quality time and like established um relate like strong relationships with a lot of people just by spending time with them and so now I think it's as life gets busy, I think the thing I want to continue to water is being intentional with less time. I think when you have a lot of quality time, you find yourself, you eventually get to the intentional conversations, but you don't have to force them. But I think naturally being able to lean into like the important things in a friendship when you only have limited time with them is something I'd love to kind of water more. So probably like efficiency, like how can I be probably a very business minded way of approaching it, but I do think like how can I be efficient with the quality of time I have with people as the quality of time probably shrinks inevitably because that's something I value. How can I at least, squeeze more juice out of the time that I have with people? And not just jump around between everyone.
Well, that certainly there's a lot to unpack there, which certainly can be a lifetime journey. It's not like you're one and done.
Yeah.
The continuation of relationships is being present
Mm,
when you're there with those relationships that are important to you.
mm.
How do you communicate that need uh, to interact with those important relationships? How do you best communicate? Do you communicate in the Gen Z way? Let's see, I don't know if I have all of these various generations.
Hey, I'm a millennial. I'll proudly
Well,
wave my millennial flag.
So
allegedly,
does
barely.
that mean you do a lot of texting and aversion to telephone calls and face-to-face relationships?
No,
How
I'm the
do you,
opposite. I
you're
hate
the
texting.
opposite. So how do you deal with conflict? How do you deal with uncomfortable discussions? Do you confront? Do you kick the can down the road? Do you deflect? There's all there's various ways
Mm.
of dealing with conflict. Some people don't like conflict. How do you deal with conflict and a difference of opinion, difference of thought?
Yeah. I think my girlfriend would affirm that I definitely don't run from conflict. I'm happy. Like I definitely don't shy away from it. I think for me it's like a sign of like strong friendship is be able to like debate and have a conflict and so yeah, I think I actually move towards it for the most part, and I think it's managing when I bring it up or when I talk about it. But um, yeah, I definitely think when it comes to like that in friendships, I just have the conversation, and I think the more transparent and honest you are, the better. And obviously, not. I feel like it's not like I feel conflicted or need to bring stuff up all the time, but definitely I wouldn't say maybe I can get better at the nuance of when I bring it up. I could definitely get better of the nuance of actually how to more bring it up with the right timing and bring it up with like grace versus just kind of like throw it out there and see if it sticks.
Well, as we've kind of spoken off camera, as it were, in 100 years from now, uh, everyone we know
Mm,
will be uh, will be gone, and we've spoken about blessed are those that plant seeds for trees under whose shade they'll never sit. What kind of seeds are you planting now at 28 that you may not sit under the shade of that tree? Any seeds that you would like to plant?
mm. Yeah, I definitely like I wish I could feel like that's a good question. I feel like I don't know how directly or I haven't gotten to see much either bloom or kind of like question myself. I'm like, okay, what seeds really am I planting? And like, am I just talking about it or am I like, how do I have that perspective? And I hope friendships and like loving on friends and family, there is like my intentionality or like intentionality slash hyper extrovertedness kind of comes off as, loving on people and planting a seed and making an impact. But um, so I don't know. I hope there's watering and seed planting that's being done for my life that I don't know of. Um, but I think there like the more I meet with you and more I get to connect with you and see how you've lived your life, I think how do I also intentionally as I go throughout life in the future go after um like you're so generous to spend time with me and like go out of your way. And that's such a blessing. And I think it just inspired me to how can I do that for like the next generation or just really identify people that, I can go out of my way for even when it's not necessary to like plant a seed. So I think I hope to do more of like what you're already doing. And it's definitely inspired me to, it's not just friendships that already are my friends anyways, but going out of my way and yeah, really seeing what seeds there are to be planted and um yeah, I think the generosity of time has definitely been an inspiration for me. So I don't know. I guess I'd love to keep growing in that area in the future.
Well, you've just planted a seed for me. Thank you for that expression, which
Mm,
is perhaps a seed that you could continue to plant with others. The
mm,
seed of gratefulness, of thankfulness, and the seed that is verbalizing
Mm,
of that gratitude and thankfulness. So you've blessed me by verbalizing your thoughts.
mm,
There are certainly other people in your life that you could plant those same seeds with,
mm,
whether it's professors, parents, family, friends, siblings, uh, work
mm,
relationships. Uh, the aspect of planting seeds is perhaps a legacy journey that you'll go through throughout your life, that
mm.
you'll be like a Johnny Appleseed, as it were, of planting seeds for trees. And so, the last question, which we've spoken about, is how will you measure your life? Uh, is there any insight that you might share right now in kind of a time capsule way so that at
Mm,
some point in time in the future, you'll be able to reflect back and listen to yourself speak to contrast what your vision is, the metrics that you have set forth in terms of measuring your life, that you'll be able to reconcile and see how you met those, the
mm.
vision of today's measurement metrics. Any thoughts on that you might want to share for posterity?
Yeah, I get the sense, and as like I learn and grow and learn like from you, I get the sense that the best things to measure on how impactful your life is are the things that are probably the hardest to measure and probably the least tangible to measure. Um, and so it's almost like as I figure out what I want to focus on more, the harder it will probably be to measure on kind of the impact even when you're gone, and impact on the people around you that you probably will never know unless it's verbalized rarely. But I have a feeling about 99% of it isn't verbalized. So um, kind of measuring kind of my life and what will what will kind of what will be my mark of success will probably be hard to truly measure. But I think it is, I guess my answer is those things that um, the relationships and the conversations and the moments where you help someone through something, or you're a piece of advice plants a seed in someone and is impactful in their life in a way even they might not know or not acknowledge or understand how it fully makes an impact. So it's all those little strings that you can attach to people and like love on people that I think are the real measure of success. And I hope I can do that in my career. And I love business, and I would love to kind of be an influence and learn on my own career wise. So I think that's a part of it. But um, back to your question on how will I measure it, it's that stuff, but it feels like the more important stuff to measure is the hardest stuff to actually quantify.
The one of the areas perhaps is how you've subscribed to service,
Mm,
how you've interacted with the creation and the following of a purpose that's larger than oneself,
mm,
uh, where one is gets up in the morning figuring how we can serve
mm,
a a a goal that is just larger than our material wishes, our material wants versus our needs. So just the thought that might be food for a future conversation of
mm,
how then shall we live, which is really the orthopraxy of knowledge, of belief, of faith, of all of that is how we actually put it into practice. That's the
Mm.
uh, difficulty, shall we say. So, well, Brett, thank you for your time and your being available and present in our conversation. I'm looking forward to the days and weeks and years ahead to see your journey that you are traveling. So have
Mm.
fun up in Gig Harbor, and we'll look forward to seeing you upon your return.
Sounds good. Looking forward to seeing you too. Thank you.